ready to dive deep into heartbreak. We've got a whole bunch of articles here about mending a broken heart, and some of it is actually pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's way more than just sad movies and ice cream, right? A lot of these articles really get into like the actual science behind heartbreak and
It's pretty wild, isn't it?
it is.
So tell me more about this whole science of heartbreak thing. Is it really as dramatic as it sounds?
It really is, yeah. You know how people say heartbreak is like physical pain? Turns out they're not that far off. Studies show romantic rejection actually triggers the same pain centers in your brain as like actual physical injury.
Right.
So, yeah, so it's not just all in your head, it's like a real physical thing your body's going through.
So I'm not being dramatic when I say it feels like my heart is actually breaking.
No, not at all.
That makes a lot of sense, though, because one of these articles, I think it was the How to Deal with a Breakup one, was talking about how love is basically like an addiction.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And it's like,
Go on.
well, I was just going to say, it's like, no wonder it's so hard to get over someone.
Yeah.
You're basically going through withdrawal.
Exactly. There's this anthropologist, Helen Fisher, and she actually compared it to, get this, cocaine withdrawal. Think about it. When you're in love, your brain is like swimming in dopamine and oxytocin.
All those happy chemicals.
Right. So when you break up, you're basically in withdrawal from those.
Wow, okay, so that explains so much. It's like you're detoxing from a relationship.
Pretty much, yeah. And that's why I think it's so important to be kind to yourself after a breakup, you know?
Yeah.
You're not just dealing with hurt feelings, it's like a whole chemical thing.
Totally. So knowing that, knowing it's not all in your head, it kind of makes you want to approach this whole healing thing a little more strategically, right?
Absolutely. Understanding the science can help a lot. Like, for instance, have you heard of thought stopping?
Is that where you try to shut down thoughts about your ex whenever they pop up?
Yeah. It sounds kind of basic, but it's actually a really powerful way to retrain your brain to focus on other stuff. You're basically like making a new path for your thoughts to go down instead of the same old ones.
Interesting. So you're consciously choosing to think about something else.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. That kind of reminds me, a lot of these articles were also big on self-care.
Yeah, for sure.
And not even just the cliche stuff like get enough sleep, eat your vegetables. Although, I mean, that's still good advice, obviously.
Oh, yeah, definitely still important.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was this one article from the Center for Relationships, and it had a really cool take on self-care.
Okay.
They emphasized finding new sources of joy, things maybe you put on hold during the relationship.
I love that. So it's like rediscovering yourself and what makes you happy outside of that relationship. That's really cool.
Yeah, and sometimes it's things you didn't even realize you'd given up, you know?
Yeah, it's so easy to kind of lose yourself in a relationship. I think that happens to a lot of people.
Oh, for sure, all the time. I think that's one of the reasons why so many people suggest journaling after a breakup, too. Like actually writing down your thoughts and feelings, even the bad ones.
Mhm.
It can be really therapeutic.
Yeah.
Helps you process everything.
It's like, you know how sometimes you give better advice to your friends than you do to yourself?
Right.
It's kind of like that. Maybe when you write it down, you can be a little more objective about what you're going through.
Totally. It's like you're getting to know yourself again almost for the first time.
Yeah. And speaking of getting to know yourself, there's this one article that really stood out to me. And I have to admit, the title threw me off at first. It was called 10 Life Lessons from a Heartbroken Pickup Artist.
Oh, wow.
I know, right? But hear me out. Hear me out. This guy had a really interesting take on relationships and breakups,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to confidence, insecurity, all that stuff. Have you read that one?
I haven't gotten to that one yet. What kind of life lessons did he, a pickup artist, learn from heartbreak?
Right. Well, one of his big takeaways was basically the more dates he went on, the less satisfied he actually felt.
Interesting.
And he called it,
Like he was getting worse at it, or?
well, kind of. He called it the paradox of choice.
Yeah.
Basically, it means that sometimes having too many options can actually make us less happy.
Oh.
Have you ever spent an hour scrolling through dating profiles and just end up feeling kind of gross and overwhelmed?
Totally. It's like that feeling of looking at a menu that's like 5 pages long. You're like, I don't even know what I want anymore.
Exactly. And I think it's the same thing with shopping or whatever.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Decision fatigue is real.
Totally. So anyway, in the context of relationships, he basically realized that constantly chasing after the next best thing was actually preventing him from finding any real connection, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, that does make sense.
And then he also talked about this whole scarcity thing, like how people tend to want what they can't have. So the less available he made himself to women, the more interested they became.
Oh, yeah, classic pickup artist strategy, right?
Right. It's funny how those, like, dating rules you hear about
Mm,
often really are based on, like, actual psychology, even if they seem kind of manipulative at first.
totally. Our brains are weird.
They are.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was thinking about this, like, most of us aren't trying to become pickup artists after a breakup. So how does this really apply to the average person going through heartbreak? You know?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And I think the main takeaway here is kind of about shifting your focus inward.
Mm,
Like instead of desperately trying to fill that void with another relationship or like playing games and stuff,
right.
it's more about using that time to like actually work on yourself,
Yeah.
you know,
Mm.
rebuild your confidence and figure out what you want, not what you think you should want.
Ooh, I like that. Like becoming the best version of yourself for yourself, not for someone else.
Exactly.
And that can be hard. A lot of these articles mention how, breakups can bring up so many insecurities
Oh, tell me about it.
because you're already feeling kind of vulnerable and rejected and all that. So it's really easy to fall into those negative thought patterns.
Totally.
And that article you mentioned, the 10 Life Lessons one, it actually talked about how if you don't deal with those insecurities, they can actually sabotage your future relationships. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's like you're bringing all that baggage with you wherever you go.
Yeah. Like if you haven't really taken the time to, heal and address your own stuff,
Yeah.
you're just going to keep repeating the same patterns over and over again, right?
Exactly. You've got to unpack those bags before you try to move on to a new destination.
Ooh, I like that. That's a good one. Okay, so we've got to unpack those bags. We've got to focus on ourselves. What else? Oh, one more thing that came up in a bunch of these articles. The importance of no contact after a breakup.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
And I know it's so hard,
The worst.
especially if you're like secretly hoping to get back together.
Right, and you're like, oh, but what if they reach out and I miss it?
I know. But I think there's something to be said for just like giving yourself that space, right? Like, what did he call it? A grace period? Yeah, a grace period. I like that.
Yeah, it's not about cutting the person off forever necessarily. It's just about creating that space to heal and rediscover yourself without the other person constantly in the picture, you know?
Exactly. Like, you can't even start processing anything when you're still caught up in all that back and forth. He also had this other point, which I thought was interesting. He said, every time you talk to your ex, especially early on, it basically resets the clock on your healing process.
Woof.
Yeah.
So it's like ripping the Band-Aid off every time you talk to them.
Exact. So you're like picking at the scab and then it can't heal.
Ouch. That's a good analogy. So sticking to that no contact thing,
Hmm.
as hard as it is, it really can be so beneficial, I think.
For sure. It gives you that chance to break free from that cycle,
Yeah. Yeah.
the hoping and the waiting and then being disappointed all over again.
And the wondering and the what ifs and
All of it.
yeah.
Just like a clean break can make such a difference, I think.
Yeah. He did say eventually, like, down the road, a genuine friendship with an ex can be possible, but only once you've both totally moved on.
Right. You're not looking for anything from each other except for friendship at that point.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just gets messy.
For sure. So, okay, we've talked about the science of heartbreak. We've talked about self-care. We've talked about boundaries. But what about all those like raw emotions that come up after a breakup?
Yeah, all the feels, right? The Psych Central article had some really good stuff on that. They were really big on the importance of like actually allowing yourself to feel those emotions, whatever they are.
Oh, interesting. So don't try to fight it.
Yeah, like whether it's sadness or anger or loneliness or even, sometimes relief, just let yourself feel it without judgment.
It's like they say, right? You can't heal if you keep picking at the wound.
Exactly. Like all those feelings, they're going to come out eventually one way or another. Might as well just deal with them head on, right?
Right.
That's where like journaling can help or talking to a therapist, even just venting to a friend you trust,
Yeah.
Just getting all that stuff out of your head can make a big difference.
Yeah, and I think sometimes even just like acknowledging those feelings, just naming them can take away some of their power.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, I'm feeling super sad right now and that's okay.
Totally. It's like you're giving yourself permission to feel those things instead of beating yourself up for it.
Yeah.
And this might sound a little weird, but that Psych Central article, they also talked about trying to find meaning in the breakup, even if it really sucks.
Oh, yeah, they talked about that, right. It's about like reframing those negative thoughts and trying to see what you can learn from the whole experience.
Exactly. It's so easy to get stuck in those shoulda, coulda, wouldas. But instead of doing that, Try asking yourself, what did I learn about myself in this relationship? What are my deal breakers? What would I do differently next time?
It's about turning that pain into something positive, something that helps you grow.
Exactly.
You know, it's funny because we've been looking at all these different articles, some for men, some more general, but they all seem to come back to the same basic idea,
What's that?
taking responsibility for your own happiness.
Right.
Like, it's not about waiting for someone else to come along and make you happy. It's about realizing you have the power to create your own happiness
Hmm.
with or without a partner.
I love that. And I think a breakup, as awful as it feels, can really force you to do that, to figure out who you are and what you want outside of a relationship.
Like that quote, sometimes good things have to fall apart so better things can fall together. It's not about pretending the breakup didn't hurt. It's just about realizing that it's a stepping stone, not the end of the road.
Beautifully said.
It's all about perspective, right?
Totally.
Well, I don't know about you, but I feel a lot more optimistic about this whole heartbreak thing after reading all
Me
this.
too.
Mm.
Like, it's definitely not going to be easy, but I think if you've got the right mindset and the right tools,
Yeah,
you can use this experience to come out stronger and wiser on the other side.
couldn't have said it better myself. So to everyone out there going through it, remember, you're not alone. It's okay to not be okay. And with time and the right support, you will heal. And who knows, you might even end up happier and more sure of yourself than ever before.
Maybe even with a better idea of what you're really looking for in a partner.
Exactly. And that's a wrap on another deep dive, folks. We've covered a lot of ground today, but hopefully you're walking away with some new insights, maybe a little bit of hope, and a reminder that even heartbreak can have a silver lining. Until next time, take care of yourselves.